Good morning, Chiefs, Santa Rosa leaders, stakeholders across Okaloosa Island, and of course, our leaders from Eglin Air Force Base and Hurlburt Air Force Base. We've started this town hall this morning just to come together and to hopefully combine our efforts, at least on a intellectual way of our way forward on some of the community risk reduction for the town of Navarre, which is very close to Hurlburt Field and Eglin. Hazardous weather, tornadoes, flooding, daily car crashes on Bloody 98, the most traveled local street, by the way, is a way of life for the town of Navarre. Natural hazards is often compounded by the local infrastructure or the lack of emergency workers, and even the culture within a community. This becomes painfully obvious when we're sitting in traffic on 98 for hours upon hours. But before we go too far, I want to highlight the problem that we're trying to look at today in our community risk reduction. So, the road systems within the local area of Navarre, where many of our airmen for both Hurlburt and Eglin live, is a mess. With Eglin Range directly to the north, and of course the Gulf of Mexico to the south, the panhandle of Florida, and especially Navarre itself, is extremely narrow. And there's only really two major highways in and out of Navarre, Florida. One being 98, Highway 98, Bloody 98, as a lot of folks have called it, where we see upwards of 90,000 drivers per day, and over to the north, Highway 87. So, with these two roadways being the major entryways and exits of all these airmen, tourists, and just natural locals within Navarre, one can easily see any real emergency becoming compounded by the lack of roads in the area. The evacuations of both Opal and Sally, we saw Highway 98 being covered by floods, and we also saw a lot of Highway 98 being destroyed. So these are some of the lessons we learned in the past as far as emergencies, and the lack of road structures actually being a huge compounding effect on any real emergency within the area. Now that we've looked at the problem, it's pretty important for us to emphasize the purpose of a community reduction plan. So this CRR aims to see Navarre's lack of road systems from many perspectives so that we could come up with several mitigation efforts that could be made both free and immediate, as well as complex and potentially multi-million-dollar mitigation efforts. Slide. So some of the steps to my plan. So directly after this, I would like to schedule all of the stakeholders that is in presently at this one initial meeting to have several more town halls to come up with more plans than just what I bring to the table. However, I do have four pretty from not so complex to complex recommendations to be made today. For one of the recommendations I will cover is the simplest, and it's just simply to sync all the traffic lights that are on Highway 98. You could be stopped at any one time by 3, even 4 red lights sequentially in a row. Upon a little bit of research, I learned that these traffic lights are not there's no rhyme or reason to them coming on or off, and they're not synced in any type of traffic flow type of tool. So that would just instantly be a free option for us to immediately take action upon just moving the traffic along quicker that is already there. Another mitigation could be for many of our community roads that are parallel to 98. So within 98, we know that it's not a township. It's actually just a community of Santa Rosa County. Yes, it has approximately 40,000 people living there. There's just houses upon houses and developments upon developments. Because it's not a township, the threshold to build here is much lower. Plus, we're great proximity to all the Air Force bases, and we have great schools. So it really brings lots of people, and the builders know that, so they continue to build all these subdivisions. However, some of these subdivisions are not connected. A lot of these subdivisions are not connected. So if you were to try to take a back road, once you come west of Eglin Range, you can't really do it within Navarre. A lot of these subdivisions have cul-de-sacs or roundabouts, and they might even literally butt right up to another subdivision. However, there's no through street. There's no connector street from community A to community B within Navarre. So another recommendation would be for me to get with the Santa Rosa county officials to see what type of county resources you would have for us to connect several of these, and it could be as much as 2 or 3 to make a lasting impact on through traffic all the way from Whispering Pines down to Panhandle Trail. So I could definitely set up some more town halls just for this recommendation alone, and work with hand in hand with the county to do real lasting impacts to get more of our locals off of 98, so that as the tourist season is heightening up, us locals know that we could pull off onto some of these side roads and actually go parallel to 98. That would ease up a lot of the traffic while simultaneously getting not being such a large burden as far as finances and resources. So for recommendation 3, it would be more towards FDOT, Florida Department of Transportation. I would like to work with state departments of transportation to gain grant money so that we can build more lanes onto 98, with it only being 4 lanes and, again, 90,000 travelers a day. The road infrastructure is just not caught up even close to the housing market and the population within our area. If we were to build one more lane on each of the sides of 98, we could see a massive ease in some of the flow of traffic, and of course that also comes with the flow of emergency workers. Some of the car accidents and things of that nature would also most likely be lowered. So I would add at minimum 1 lane per side, and we can already see those to our those to our west and our east already accomplishing this in Panama City and in Gulf Breeze. They've both started this process, and it's really giving them some relief. For my 4th recommendation, it's the most complex and it's the most financially burdensome. However, this is where I have brought in the leadership from the Eglin Air Force Base and from Hurlburt Air Force Base. So because of the geography, Eglin Air Force Base being more to the northeast of 98, and then of course Hurlburt Field directly on 98. My recommendation is for Eglin Range, which is also covering many parts of Navarre. I would recommend that Eglin Air Force Base leadership actually go ahead and work with the FDOT, work with the local economy on Okaloosa Island, or on Okaloosa County and on Santa Rosa County, to build a military-only bypass from Hurlburt Field out the back gate, and it would go through Eglin Range. It would not take a ton of our training space, as we know we have hundreds of thousands of acres on the Eglin Range for training purposes. Even if we were to build just a military-only bypass through the Eglin Range that goes directly parallel That would mitigate all of the backup traffic that comes off of Herbert Field from also the people to the north of Eglinbrick coming through there as well, and all the schools that are directly outside of Herbert Field as well. It would just, they would have a complete bypass that would be going just for the military to keep the, I mean, we got to think about Herbert Field being 22,000 airmen alone, with a vast majority of them, if you look at the census, is actually living in Navarre. If we were to build just a, I mean, it could be simple road too. We're not talking about bridges. We're not talking about even pavement for the first phases. We could make literally a dirt road. And I suspect, as of looking at the Anglian Range maps, some of these roads already exist. We just need to, again, get some connector roads and get the authority for all of Herbert Field military personnel to use that as an exit from work and to work each day. Now, you might be asking me, all right, well, what's it going to take for all of these things? We're pretty early on in our planning process for this, and because I've given you courses of actions, 4 different COAs, right? In the military, we call it COAs, courses of action. I'm giving you 4 different COAs. I have not spent a ton of my time or research at this time to see definitive numbers on these things, but just to kind of quickly see what kind of resources are going to be required for all of these. The sinking of the traffic lights, that's instant. That's just a no-brainer. Resources needed, essentially Santa Rosa County Authority and the Public Works guys to make it happen. Almost free. No new resources there. So for connections of the subdivisions and the back roads, that would of course need Santa Rosa County approval, FDOT funds, and resources potentially if the counties could not fund this themselves. As far as the COA where we add lanes to Highway 98, that would be major money. I mean, we are talking multi-million dollars, probably multi-year process in this. And of course, for the military bypass, as I said, I would probably do that in phases. Doing a study to see which roads that already exist could we use, and then starting with connector roads there as well to maybe make that just a dirt path, and then on into the many years into the future, 10 years or so, we can maybe think of paving that. So for the highlight data, there are a few things that I've already talked about as far as data of why this is actually justification for this. So just last year, as we know, Herbert Field leaders, we lost one of our airmen in a car accident where the bus actually ran him over on his motorcycle. I remember that day being in traffic for almost 4 hours while the emergency workers of Santa Rosa was dealing with this issue. So that alone ought to be enough for a wake-up call for us. But however, as we said, with 98 drivers, I mean, there's 90,000 drivers plus daily. That's to compete with all of the airmen, all of the locals going north to Pensacola and all the larger cities neighboring us. But also, we're a tourist town, right? We have the best beaches in the world. I've traveled the whole world and I've never seen beaches like Navarre Beach. The white sands is just phenomenal. However, with that, I mean, we bring in millions and millions of dollars in revenue from our tourism every year. That also brings a large number of drivers. And of course, just the weekly crashes and the fender benders and all these things. As I mentioned, the airman who died last year, that took a good 4 hours for the emergency workers to take care of. But how many every single day? I venture to say every single day there's a car accident on 98 that our fire and emergency workers have to respond to. How much more effort could be pushed towards education, mitigation of other hazards, and efforts being made to make our community better for the emergency management and fire workers if they weren't having to spend all of their time just surviving, just essentially going and um, responding to car accidents on Highway 98. So I really truly think that if anything is to take away is that as professionals, the time that we would get back as airmen to getting to and from work, it's truly affecting our readiness as airmen on the Air Force bases. It is also impacting the fire and emergency professionals as they try to get their work done, and they're just constantly having to do small little fender bender checks and stuff. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and open up for discussion if anyone has any recommendations. But as of right now, that is what I have to propose to all of you stakeholders. Thank you.